Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Josephine Franklin, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Our topic today is Get Your Students on the Path to Financial Success. Following are a few technical notes of information to assist you during the webinar. If you have a technical problem during the broadcast, please call Zoom support at the toll-free number typed in red, 888-799-966, extension 2, and provide today's webinar ID that you see typed in red, 866-867-238. As you participate in this webinar, we invite you to expand the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NASSPwebinar. We are also on Facebook at facebook.com/principals. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be available as a PowerPoint on the NASSP webinar within 24 hours at nassp.org/webinars. We are pleased to have with us today Hillary Hunt. Hillary is a national expert in financial education with expertise in curriculum development, teaching training, and financial education policy. She is the lead author for Discover Financial Services and Discovery Education's Pathway to Financial Success in Schools program. Previously, Hillary served as Director of Financial Education for Pennsylvania, Vice President of Economics Pennsylvania, and the State Coalition Coordinator for the National Jump Start Coalition. Hillary's work is inspired by the time she spent as a math teacher in Virginia. She holds a bachelor's in mathematics from the College of William and Mary and a master's in education entrepreneurship from the University of Pennsylvania. During the webinar, the presenters invite your questions. Please submit them using the chat box on your webinar panel. We will respond to as many questions as time permits. If we run out of time to answer all questions, we will respond by email following the broadcast. And now, I would like to bring our presenter to start the webinar. Hillary, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Josephine. I appreciate that introduction. And thank you to everybody who is joining us on the line today. As Josephine mentioned, I started my career as a secondary math teacher in Virginia, and I've been focused on financial education now for about 2 decades. And in full disclosure, I happen to be married to a secondary school principal. So I'm rather familiar with the work and the challenges that are faced by education administrators on a day-to-day basis. So with that, it is my pleasure to join you today and talk specifically about financial education in secondary schools, your role as principals in financial education, and share with you in particular this outstanding resource from Discover Financial Services and Discovery Education. There really are many considerations when it comes to providing financial education in schools. Lots of things that you as education administrators have to think about. In particular, there's this issue of whether or not financial education is required or whether it's an elective. Now, the Council for Economic Education, which is based out of New York, issues a report about every 2 years that tracks financial education across the country. In 2018, we know that 23 states require financial education as a high school course in order for students to graduate. In states without such a mandate, we know that many school districts of their own volition at the local level have established similar requirements. For example, in my own home state of Pennsylvania, about 20 to 25% of school districts require such a course. Other considerations that are taken into thought as an administrator might be whether or not this is a course that is a standalone, so perhaps one semester standalone course that is just dedicated to personal finance content, or if it will be embedded in another course, say, for example, economics or within family consumer science. The certification or department is another consideration. For example, we know that state regulations vary from one state to the next in terms of who's best suited or who's certified to teach personal finance within that state. We find that it often lies within business, social studies, family consumer science, or math departments. And even then, some teachers are more confident in their ability to teach personal finance concepts than others, even sometimes within one department within a school. There's also the question of what instruction students receive in earlier grades. So starting in kindergarten or even as early as pre-K all the way through 8th grade. New Jersey, for example, just passed legislation just signed in January that requires personal finance coursework in grades 6 through 8, while many other states have personal finance standards with lower level benchmarks. So certainly taking into consideration very often grades 3, 5, and 8 with many of those standards. And then comes the question of resources, and that's really the heart of what we're going to talk about today, the resources that are available to teach personal finance in schools. And that's where Pathway to Financial Success comes in. Now, I've been working in the field of financial education for 2 decades. I know educators have lots of choices when it comes to financial literacy resources, and many of the best financial educators that I know draw from a variety of these resources. It's, one of the things I think is great is that this program in particular serves well and is compatible with many of those other resources teachers may already be using. Certainly, the Pathway to Financial Success materials, I argue, should be added to those educators' toolboxes. Found at pathwayinschools.com, the Pathway to Financial Success program has resources for both middle and high school educators, students, and parents. We're going to get started here with the high school materials. It is a very comprehensive program. There are 8 instructional units, and there are a variety of different resources. As I mentioned, there are 8 thematic units. The first 4 you see here listed on the left, beginning with Unit 1, being financially responsible, really focuses on goals and budgeting. Then in Unit 2, we're taking a look at using financial institutions and banking. In Unit 3, we have the topic of paying for higher education. And then finally, in Unit 4, we address income and taxes and getting paid. Then, as we look at the subsequent units, Units 5 through 8, we move on to topics such as credit, major financial decisions like getting a job, getting a car or insurance. And then finally, we move into Unit 8, where we talk about investing and preventing fraud, such as identity theft. Now, within each of these units, you'll find there are 5 topic areas and at least one resource, self-paced module, a classroom activity, family connection, or resource link. So we're going to take a look at those here one by one. By the way, I'm getting just a little bit of background noise. I don't know if anybody is maybe perhaps not muted. So we just might want to double check on that. Thank you so much. All right, I saw a couple of you comment on that as well. So hopefully you can still hear me well. All right, so let's take a look at, admittedly, what is one of my favorite topics, and that is the self-paced modules. This one that we're taking a look at right now comes from Unit 2, which is on mobile banking, and I think it's super relevant for teens. Obviously, teens are using mobile banking at much higher rates than generations before them, and I also find that this is a topic sometimes that our educators are a little bit hesitant with. I've talked to teachers, and many times I said, if you have not deposited a check by taking a picture of it with your phone, or if you're not making balance transfers or doing other things on your with your mobile device, you need to start doing that, because that's obviously where our students are. So this whole topic here under using mobile banking is really highly relevant for students. Each of these modules is pretty short. They take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to complete if students are going through them on their own. They can take more time, however, if an educator is using them in a direct instructional setting. So these modules are incredibly flexible. They lend themselves just as well to just about any learning environment, which is particularly useful when access to devices may be limited. So for example, in a classroom setting, let's say that the only person with access to the device is the educator. The educator can certainly use this in a full class environment, projecting the modules on the screen and going through them as a class. And we offer recommendations for that type of facilitation. Just as easily in a one-to-one setting, students could certainly go through the module on their own, in their own time, either in class or as a homework assignment. I'd like to share with you how one of the animations from the module, just to give you a little bit of a taste of these. So let's make sure you guys, if you don't hear this, hopefully you will. If you don't, please let us know over in the chat. Let me go ahead and click play.
Banking, now and in the future. Technology has changed just about every aspect of our lives in the modern world. How we bank and interact with finances is no exception. Think about it. Many people now do almost all of their banking without ever stepping foot in an actual branch. They can do many transactions right from their phones. This has changed the entire banking industry, with less need for bank tellers and even bank branches. At the same time, billions of dollars are being invested into new banking technologies. There's even a whole new industry, fintech, that is trying to change the way people interact with and manage their money. So what does this have to do with you? All of this new technology means you have easier access to financial products, services, and information than any generation before, and the technology continues to evolve. But what are the risks? In this module, we'll look at what mobile banking products look like today, innovations in the financial marketplace, and how to stay safe when handling your finances online.
So as you can see, there are, I think the graphics are really engaging. They're certainly going to capture the attention of students. Following the intro at the beginning of each of these modules, students will then find a pretest that has 3 multiple choice questions. So after each of those questions, the students get immediate feedback to let him or her know if their answer was correct or not. Now, in a classroom setting, the educator might, for example, pose the question to the entire class, maybe have folks raise their hands or ask one student to offer an answer. So that's going to look different depending on how this is facilitated. And again, those strategies are referenced in the educator guide. On each of the questions, students will find out which answers they got right, which ones they got wrong. We find that this immediate acknowledgement and the opportunity to see what the correct answer was is something that students really appreciate. Moving on, the students go through what we call the Learn section of each of these modules, where they are encountering a variety of different information and content. So in this case, students click on each of the plus signs and are able to reveal more information. In this case, some aspect of online banking. There are different functionalities, as I mentioned, that students encounter, so it's not the same type of engagement throughout. It really helps students to stay engaged with the material. We know that students of this generation have a limited attention spans and have high expectations. The Fortnite generation and what have you is one that expects a high level of interaction, and that certainly is offered throughout the module. The modules are very much focused on the student. So here a student is asked to reflect on how they might use a mobile banking app. So remember, these are designed for broad high school use, so we try to make them as applicable for a 9th grader as it would be for a 12th grader. So we're trying to be very flexible and recognizing as well that there might be a wide range of financial experience among students that are taking these modules. Here you can see the progress that has been made. So this menu over here on the left-hand side can be shown or hidden depending on the student or the educator's preference. At the conclusion of each module, there's a short wrap-up. Notice that I've turned on the transcript here, by the way. I wanted to make sure that you know there is audio throughout each of these modules. If students don't have audio capability, or you have students working on their own devices without earbuds, you might want to have them turn this on. It's also great for students with disabilities. This can be turned on up in the upper right-hand corner, and once turned on, it will stay on. Now, that said, not everything in these modules is read aloud to the students. Research has shown that with this type of an instructional model or module, students often retain more information when they read it as opposed to listening to it. So there's a mix of each of those throughout each individual module. To conclude each of the modules, there's a 5-question post-test. Note this is not a repeat of the pretest. We ask different questions and ask them in different ways. And students will encounter different types of interactions here as well, such as this one, which is a fill in the blank. There's also drop-down menus, matching, sorting, etc. A number of educators that we've talked to have really have pointed out that this functionality is great because it also helps students to prepare for other more high-stakes online assessments. Getting used to these types of encounters in a low-stakes manner is a great form of practice. In the end, students find out what their score was on the post-test. Some teachers ask students to take a screenshot of that to demonstrate their final score and their completion of each of the modules. Now, I mentioned earlier that we provide educator resources. So there is a unit guide as well as an overall program guide, but each of the units offer information on backgrounds, helps the teachers from a content perspective, and then addresses all of the topics and resources, and then gives step-by-step, section-by-section tips for facilitating the self-paced modules within the classroom. There's also a correlation to standards. In this case, at the high school level, we're correlating to the financial literacy standards from the Council for Economic Education. And that is something that the educators we found very useful. There's also an educator program guide, which is overarching for the entire high school program. This covers all of those 8 units, reviews what type of technology is needed, and just provides some overall tips and tricks for the overall program itself. So as I mentioned before, these resources are available at pathwayinschools.com. And I wanted to show you just a little bit more of what else you would find here at the high school level within the program. So once you get to the website in the high school section, scroll down and you'll notice each of those units as well as the program educator guide that I mentioned a few moments listed there. If we look specifically at Unit 2, we'll see under the first topic, Understanding Financial Institutions, that it offers some resource links. Every topic within the program offers links to other resources. Now, this is a feature that I absolutely love about this program. We did not develop Pathway to Financial Success in a vacuum and know that it won't be used in a vacuum. And so in each section, educators will find other great resources, things from folks like the AICPA, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, Take Charge Today, National Endowment for Financial Education, other organizations out there that are in this space, and things that we think are complementary to this program as well. Those of you who might be familiar with financial education resources might recognize some of those sources. Looking back at Unit 2, under Topic 2, here we'll find a family connection. There's one of these for each unit. Now, it's interesting because there's a lot of elementary school programs that offer sort of things that can go home with parents. We don't find that nearly as often at the high school level, but educators that I've talked to say that very frequently their high school parents are learning side by side, in particular, about some of these topics with their high school students. So nowadays, certainly teachers can download and print and send these home. We know that's probably not going to happen as much, but they can push it out through Remind or whatever email or communication system that they're using to engage with parents, and provides lots of ways for parents and to extend these conversations at home. Last but not least, each unit also has 2 classroom activities. And so give you a little bit of a taste of one of these. This is the one on using mobile banking, just to extend that topic a little bit. You'll see here that all of the materials and information is provided for the educators. All of the activities are very hands-on. So in this one, for example, students would cut apart these different features that they might look for in a mobile banking app and prioritize them in what they think they would need. Next, students work in a group and research different mobile banking apps from different financial institutions and compare them. Now, this can be really surprising for some students. For example, my very own local bank only allows 2 checks to be deposited per month before incurring a charge, and they also place a lot of limits on checks. That might not be the case and isn't the case with other financial institutions. So not only are we teaching the personal finance concept here of shopping around, but also just how to make informed financial decisions or other decisions as well, listing your alternatives, potential criteria, and comparing their options. As administrators, I think you'll appreciate that each of these lessons really encourages educators to use a variety of pedagogical techniques. These are not sage on the stage or chalk and talk lessons in any way. They really are quite hands-on. In fact, each is also aligned to at least one of the 21st century skills, or 4 C's. The one other component that I wanted to point out is that each of these activities has what we call a connect section. So here you'll see we talk about how does this activity connect to the student. And then I think especially in today's career, college and career readiness atmosphere, particularly relevant, each one of these activities points out a specific career. Very frequently, they aren't careers in finance. So for example, the one here is a mobile app developer. And then finally, how does this connect to the world? So the third one, sometimes we connect to technology. Here we're talking about the world, mobile banking, for example, has really opened up access to financial services in countries like Africa and India, where, interestingly enough, nowadays more people have access to a cell phone than to clean water or electricity. So, your interesting tidbit or factoid for the day. So going back, as I mentioned before, there's a total of 8 thematic units at the high school level, and all of the materials for the first 4 units are completely available and online right now. Within units 5 through 8, you'll find the classroom activities, the family connections, and the resources are all online. The modules have been released 1 unit at a time now over the past few months, and we'll be launching unit 5 very soon. And then the remaining 3 modules are released in succession. What I encourage each of you to do is to go to the home page. Again, it's pathwayinschools.com. Up in the upper right-hand corner, you will see that you can sign up for updates. That allows you to get an email when anything new is added to the site, and you'll find out about that right in your inbox. By signing up, you'll also be one of the first to know about the launch of the new middle school resources. The first unit is actually available now and just launched this week, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek of what some of this content looks like. So the middle school modules are a little bit different. They are, as I said, designed for the middle school grade levels, and they take a different approach in that these are activities that are intended to be embedded within or integrated within core classes. So activities for math, social studies, English language arts, as well as social studies. So each of these has a video for the teachers, because again, as you get progressively lower in the grade levels, teachers tend to get progressively a little less comfortable with the personal finance content. So there's a 3 to 4 minute explainer video for the educator that kicks off the content for that unit, and then a similar one for the student. The student video is referenced in each of the classroom activities, which again, as I mentioned, we have one for each unit within each unit for math, ELA, and for social studies. Again, a very simple or similar form and fashion as what we saw at the high school level, but this time very much focused on the core content. So we're aligned to Common Core standards here for math and for ELA and for C3 for social studies. And again, incredibly hands-on. So for example, this math activity for budgeting has students drawing, working in pairs and drawing salary cards where they discover what the average annual income is. They combine those with their partner. They have to determine each person's annual gross pay, reduce taxes, determine an annual net pay, and then from that, determine their monthly net pay. So lots of applications here of percentages, which are then reinforced even further by taking a monthly budget and taking a look at what are sort of some recommended categories and recommended percentages for each. And so based on those percentages, they have to figure out and allocate their income accordingly. And then with each subsequent round, they get a Life Happens card, which are all very relevant and in some cases end up in taking a hit to their expenses or something changes either to increase or decrease one of those, and they have to make choices then on how they're going to accommodate that. So I'm very excited to share this with you. I know I sped through a lot of information in a relatively short period of time, but I wanted to thank all of you for joining us today. Thank you to NASSP for letting us join you. And at this point, I'd be happy to use the remaining time that we have to answer any questions.
Okay. So I'm seeing a question come in that says, how can the Pathways to Financial Success program tie into our existing financial education efforts?
That's a great question. So if you already have financial education course or program in your school, for example, say, for example, you're using a textbook or you're using another existing program that maybe has other lessons or components. This is one of the beauties about the Pathway to Financial Success program is that it will embed very easily within those. And so, you know, I kind of think of it kind of like a zipper, you know, they just kind of go together quite seamlessly in that these, in particular, the self-paced modules can be used to integrate within. So for example, say a teacher has a lesson that or a unit they've always done on budgeting, they can kick things off with the self-paced module. And they might also consider taking a look at the classroom activities and seeing if one is maybe something that complements or maybe is something that they like even better than the way that they're teaching it right now. One of the things I think is great about this set of resources is that it is all very new and very fresh. And so we know that sometimes things can get a little bit outdated, particularly, you know, I shared with you the mobile banking piece. You know, if your program right now is not addressing mobile banking, you know, that's obviously a piece that should be added to your financial education program and can be augmented with the materials from this.
Thank you. Here's another question for you, Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
Our school isn't one-to-one. Can we still use the program's self-paced modules?
Absolutely. So if you aren't one-to-one, don't hesitate. There are a couple of different ways that the program can be used. Certainly, full group classroom instruction is definitely an option, as is small group work. So, you know, maybe you know, students can share devices or work in a small group, but really that classroom instruction version works just as well. And I find it leads to a lot of interesting conversations. And unit by unit, we offer recommendations for literally screen by screen as you go through, as many times as you'd want to pause and interact and sort of add to the experience with students. You can use some of those facilitation strategies and questions that you can pose there as well. So really the manner in which these are utilized or used in the classroom is incredibly flexible. So 10 to 20 minutes if a student is doing it by themselves, or they can go through in a classroom setting, and this could easily, one module could really easily take an entire class period worth of instruction if the educator wants to do it and do it in that manner.
Thank you. Hillary, not seeing any more questions in our queue. Can you move on to the final slide?
Yep.
I'd like to extend an invitation to join your colleagues for the 2019 National Principals Conference, sponsored by NASSP, July 18th to 20th in Boston, Mass. You can learn about the conference and register at the address shown in the slide, www.principalsconference.org. With that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And again, thank you, Hillary, for being our presenter this afternoon. Thanks so very much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.